All right, there you go.
Hi, everybody. For those that are not familiar with me, my name is Baroness Audrye Beneyt. I am a sinister or left-handed scribe here in the East Kingdom. I focus primarily on illumination, but I do begrudgingly do some calligraphy. Being left-handed makes everything complicated. I have been a scribe for 3.5 to 4 years now. And I've run a little bit of everything from recreating a Roman mosaic in paint to later period squashed bug style illumination. I received my silver brooch in 2019 and a Manche in 2020. And I am apprenticed to Maîtresse Camille Desjardins, who is with us today as well. I am going to share a link for my profile information. If you have questions after class, feel free to reach out to me. This is going to be a constantly working document, so you can bookmark it and save it. And it will be there for you. In theory, in perpetuity, cross your fingers, Google. So the purpose of today's class is to actually talk about what a basic Scribal kit looks like. We teach this class in Malagentia pretty frequently. I have since moved away from Malagentia and now am in Bergenthal. And with pandemic times, I thought it'd be really great to have this class hosted in an online setting so that people from across the kingdom in a way can see what it is that we do and the kinds of tools that we use and what you need to get going. So to start off, I'll say that I'm going to cover both calligraphy and illumination for the basic toolkits. And after today's class, my future classes are going to focus primarily on illumination because I haven't quite figured out how to teach left-handed calligraphy yet. I'm working on that. That's another project altogether. So I'm gonna share another link, and that is a Scribal supplies list. And this is another living document you'll be able to access, so go ahead and bookmark it. It actually has active links right now to both Amazon and Dick Blick for all of the basics in a novice, what I would call a novice kit for both calligraphy and illumination. So I'm going to pull up on my screen my walkthrough, and we're going to go from there. So I'm going to do a little bit of show and tell. I'm going to show you stuff that I have and kind of go down through the list. So a very basic toolkit is going to require essentially 4 to 5 different things. You're going to want paper, a pencil to do your drawing with, ink for calligraphy, paint, and brushes if you're doing illumination. That is really all you need to get going. So I'm going to start with the base, the ground, your paper. We, in the East Kingdom specifically, we generally like to see people start out on a Bristol. It's a little heavier weight. It's good for taking paint and calligraphy. It's really easy to recognize, and you can get it at just about any art supply store. This is the Bristol that I use, Strathmore Bristol. It's a 100-pound weight, and I like the vellum finish. You'll see that yellow pad in 2 different finishes, a vellum finish and a smooth finish. I like the vellum finish because it takes the paint a little better. It's got a little bit of tooth to the paper, and it has a nice texture. So that's what I recommend for your starting ground for paper. And you can get that pad of paper at just about any art supply store. Michael's, Dick Blick, all of them will often have sales where you can buy one, get one, or buy one, get 2. And so I have probably in my office 30 pads. I will never go through 30 pads, but I also use it as my practice paper for everything. I strongly encourage a ruler in your basic kit, because you're going to want to be able to draw margins, draw straight lines, and nothing is straighter than a ruler. I'm looking for my little one. Kill two birds with one stone and get a ruler that has a cork back. It will keep the ruler off the paper, and you're less likely to hit your paint later on in another lesson. This is a teeny tiny one. This is a 6-inch ruler. I use this one a lot because I like small things, but definitely get a cork back one. In the list, I think the ruler that I've given links to might be a 12-inch cork backed, but they're not expensive. Certainly get that. Then of course you need a pencil. A standard number 2 pencil is what they call an HB lead. It is middle of the road. It's what you use for everything. Those work fine, work great. I actually use a little harder lead, and the reason I use a little harder lead is because it doesn't smear on the paper. So I use one step higher in hardness. So I use a 2H lead pencil. I'm hoping these are coming through not backwards. Okay, good. So I use a 2H lead, but a number 2 pencil works just fine. Don't use pink erasers. They leave a residue behind that can interrupt the flow of calligraphy as well as the flow of paint on your paper. So we actually recommend like a high polymer plastic eraser, really white, again, super cheap. You can get a pack of 3 of them for like $1.50. The other one that's really great to get, and it's not in the base kit, but I'll show it to you now while I'm talking about it, are these little gray erasers, because you can turn them into, they're essentially putty. This one's still wrapped because I have dogs and I don't want dog hair in it. That's a frequent problem here. So I strongly encourage a couple of different kinds of erasers. I like the white ones. They work really well. Recently, I've picked up the yellow art ones. I like those ones a lot too. But in the base kit, white plastic eraser works great. So those are really basic things that you're going to need for both calligraphy and illumination, regardless of what you're doing. If we're going to go to calligraphy, there's a couple different ways you can go. You can get dip pens, or you can get cartridge pens. You will see felt tip calligraphy markers. I am going to strongly encourage you to never touch them. And the reason I say that is because they have a very different feel when it comes to practice. They behave differently. They handle differently on paper. And I would much rather, when you're practicing, you use the tool that you're going to be using going forward. There are a couple different kinds of cartridge pens. I have a Rotring, but they're pretty pricey. I just recently picked up Pilot's parallel pens, and I actually really like these. They're a little cheaper. This is a 2.4 millimeter, so it's pretty large, but a large pen is really good for practice. It lets you see your letter forms really nicely. I almost exclusively use a dip pen. So this is the pen holder and the nib with a reservoir on the back to hold the ink. These are Mitchell nibs. I get them through John Neal. On the list, I've put a Speedball C Kit because it's easy to access. Nibs come in various hardnesses, various flexibilities. The ones that I use are Mitchell, and I like them. I find Speedball to be a little too flexible for me. So the Mitchell's a little stiffer, and so I'm a little heavier handed. That works out really well. For ink, I'm kind of spoiled, and I almost exclusively use ink that's made by another Scadian, and it's made, I don't know if you're gonna be able to see that. It's Ian the Green's Green Man Calligraphy ink. It's actually a period recipe iron gall ink. There's a link to that I'm gonna send in a different document. It's a really nice ink. The really nice thing about it is that it gets darker over time. So instead of it getting lighter and fading, it gets darker because of the iron oxide process. Otherwise, in the list that I've given you is Higgins Eternal. Higgins Eternal is not a waterproof ink. And the reason I recommend it is because it's not waterproof. Makes it much easier to clean your nibs. It's also very light fast and very, very black. It's a very rich colored ink. The other thing that you'll need, and oddly, I do not appear to have one on my desk here, but you all know what it is a little 6-pan palette for paint. Otherwise, you can use a dish. I have done that multiple times. I also probably in this room right now somewhere have a stack of 20 some odd palettes because I don't know how to not. So you'll need a palette for paint, and that's when we sort of hit what is considered the touchy area for scribes. For illuminators, we can be kind of picky about which paint we use. And I was, for lack of a better phrase, born and raised on Holbein. Specifically, you're looking for gouache. And gouache is a lot like watercolor. It functions very similarly, except the difference is that gouache has a binder in it, typically chalk, which makes it more opaque. So I use Holbein, and this is a simple 12 set kit. Comes with just about every color you'll need to get going, and then some, and some you won't, and some you can just play with. The big key with Holbein is not to get acrylic gouache. You want artist's gouache. And I did link that in the spreadsheet to make sure that you can physically see which one you're getting. You absolutely want to stay away from anything that says acrylic because it's got acrylic bases in it, and those we don't use on scrolls. The other really common brand is Winsor & Newton. Another really great brand. I know a lot of people use that exclusively. I use Winsor & Newton for a lot of my metallics. So things like golds and silvers, I like Winsor & Newton for. I think they're just a little bit denser pigmented paint. So I have links for both of those in that spreadsheet. And we often get the question, well, I went to Michael's and they had Artist's Loft gouache and it was $10. Why do I want to spend $40 and not $10? Camilla's shaking her head. Yes. So I will say that if you're trying to get paint into somebody's hands, that'll work. That'll start them off. That said, I would much prefer to see a student spend a little more money and get a paint that behaves better, that flows better, and is a little bit more opaque than, say, Reeves or Artist Loft, than and struggle and fight with it. And the example that I use is one that was taught to me by a musician. When you're learning to play guitar, you don't go to Walmart and pick the $60 guitar off the rack. Because when you're learning to play the guitar, the $60 guitar isn't going to make the right sounds no matter how good you are. And you're going to get frustrated and you're going to throw the guitar away and not play. So I'd rather you save and spend a little money and buy a little bit more expensive gouache because it's easier to work with and easier to learn. And you will feel much better about the end result, and it will keep you moving forward. The other really nice thing about both Holbein and Winsor Newton is they last forever. I have a tube. Where did it go? I have a tube of Ultramarine Deep that I have been using for 3 years, and it's a teeny tiny little tube. And I think it's on the floor now, but it's a little bitty tube. So it goes a long way. And the really nice thing about gouache is that you can reconstitute it. So leave it in your palette. You don't need to clean it. Just cover it, throw it in a bag after it's dry, add water later, and you're good to go. Camille will laugh, but I rarely wash palettes. Maybe I've washed palettes twice in 4 years, like truly washed them. So you can go a long way with a little bit of paint. And then brushes. I have almost exclusively used a series from Princeton. They're Princeton Velvet Touch. And I put on the list 3 brushes because I don't think you need any more than 3, really. Number 2 round, a 0 round, and a 10-aught short liner. Princeton Velvet Touch brushes are really nice, low-priced brushes that will last a really long time. And you can do an awful lot with them. I have a number 4 round. This is not the magic number 4, but it's a new one. The key is that it comes to a really fine point, and it's not gonna focus on it. Whoop, there. It comes to a really fine point. I can do pretty incredible detail work with a number 4 round. But when you're learning to paint and you're learning to do detail, don't be afraid to use a smaller brush. This is a 10-aught short liner. It holds a lot of paint. It does really nice lines. Yes, Camille points out that she still has tubes that she's been using for 12 years. And maybe it's because that you don't wash your palettes that I don't wash my palettes. Maybe that's a teacher thing. So those 3 brushes will take you a long way. I recently did a scroll here in the East Kingdom for, in a completely different style, the infamous Rocket Cats scroll. I did the entire thing with a number 4, and it's got some really fine details. So as long as the brush has a really good point on it, then you're good to go. And when it stops having a good point on it, like this one doesn't have a good point on it anymore. It's pretty fuzzy. I put a piece of tape on it, and that's how I know I'm not going to use it anymore, and it becomes a mixing brush. So I use it to mix my paint. So that's the basic kit list for what I would consider a novice. I am going to go through some of the things that improve my kit. And this is going to be a little bit more static because, as I mentioned to Heather Mariette earlier, I literally was walking through my office and picking things up and adding them to my desk to show them. So the next thing that I would consider getting is a T-square. This is a T-square from Dick Blick. It's not cork-backed, but it does have a lip on it. So you can see that there's a little bit of a lip. I use it to do lining and do my margins. Ooh, this one's actually off a little bit, but that's okay. Now I understand why things have been a little off lately. This one's probably 2.5 years old. It probably needs to be replaced at this point. I use my T-square an awful lot for margins, for lining, for calligraphy. for poking at the dogs when they're in my face. The next thing that I want to show you, everybody uses it, not everybody uses it. I use graph paper. I do all of my initial work on graph paper because it lets me block my scroll and I know exactly where things are going to go and exactly how things are going to fit. I also have the ability to freehand draw a little better because I can make proportions look correct. This particular pad is from Canson. It's an 11 by 17 and it's a 10 by 10. Nope, 8, it's an 8 by 8, so 8 squares per inch. I use that size because I can get all of my scrolls, all of the scrolls that I do typically, I can get with that one pad of paper. Low tack painter's tape, super important. You can tape your graph paper to your paper and then trace your design onto your paper. You can tape your paper down so it doesn't go anywhere. All kinds of neat things that you can do with it. You can protect spaces. If you want to protect your margins all the way, you can use painter's tape. There is another tape out there called frog tape. It's green, it's low tack. I have used it, but I've also noticed that it's left some residue behind. And I prefer not to leave some residue. So I've gone back to using just regular blue painter's tape. This particular one is a clean release duck painter's tape. And then my magical light board. And I'll be adding a link to this in that spreadsheet probably this evening because I get asked about this an awful lot. This is my light board. It is an A4 size and the whole body is aluminum. So it's pretty rugged and it's wired directly in. There's no port here. So it comes with a port that plugs in here as opposed to in here. It keeps it safe. And it has multiple light settings. I do a lot of work on this, but there's no flex to it at all. And that's the thing that I like the most. And then Camille will laugh. I use Micron pens, but don't you stick your tongue out at me. Never on a scroll. Microns don't go on scrolls. I use Micron pens to line my art on my graph paper so that I can then trace it through with my light pad. I actually have a design that I'm working on right now and I'll give you a sneak peek. This is a piece that I'm actually working on for next court. It is the Mammon axe. From the Mammon Viking Norse find that I will be getting ready to line in Micron and then move over. That's all hand drawn and ready to go. Camille and I have this conversation a lot because I really dislike the look of a Micron pen on a scroll because once I started using black to do my lining or burnt umber to do my lining, this looks really faded. There's a really visible difference when you can see it on a scroll next to paint, next to black paint. And yes, Camille uses the Micron to outline where her mini autumn's gonna go when she's doing gold leaf work. So there's that. And then one of the last things I wanted to mention was a couple of resources, a couple of reference materials for both calligraphy and illumination. It's really interesting because the materials that I built some of this class from come from my Grand Laurel. And you can see the generational difference because she talks very heavily about get this book and this book and this book. But we're so internet driven now that a lot of our resources are available online. So for calligraphy, I actually have a printed copy that, let me pause there. Everybody that I have ever met for calligraphy says to use the Mark Drogan medieval calligraphy book. Literally everyone. Tell me I'm wrong. I don't like that book at all, but also I'm a lefty. So I have a printed copy of David Harris's The Art of Calligraphy. And this is my go-to book for learning a hand. And part of the reason for that is that, number one, he really goes into nib widths, how tall a letter is based on your pen size. And I learned to understand calligraphy a little better because of it. But also I can really see stroke order. Because of the way the book is designed, you can see each and every stroke, the order of the strokes that he does them in, and what comes first. So you can sort of see where the strokes overlap. That's really important for things like the Batard W, which will be the bane of my existence until the day I die, because I think probably I'm a lefty. So that is my go-to calligraphy book, and it's in my nice green binder, so I can always find it. It was out of print for a while, and it's back now. I actually just bought it and sent it to a new calligrapher out in Concordia because he was getting very frustrated, and this is my go-to reference. It's, I think, $20 on Amazon. And then the other book for illumination is Christopher DeHamel's A History of Illuminated Manuscripts, which I actually have two different versions of, but it's got some really nice color exemplars that you can go buy. But for most everything now, I look online because the British Library or the Getty, the resources online are so good. You can zoom in and see every little brush stroke now. The illumination author, Maeve, is A History of Illuminated Manuscripts. And the author is Christopher DeHamel. And I'm going to show off a new book that I just got because a certain somebody is in the room. I didn't just get it. I've had it a couple months now, but this is actually a catalog book from an auction, Sommelier. And this is where I found the exemplars for Robert's Manche. And it's got some really nice color images covering a little bit of everything, whew, including the auction slip that just went down. And it gave me a good starting point to see kind of where I wanted to go. I was able to just sort of look through and then find a style and a time period I wanted to play with. And in his case, I actually had him pick out a half a dozen things he wanted me to try, and then I picked one. So I'll put that back so I don't lose it. So there's a lot of different places that you can find that kind of information. I had started linking resources, online resources and library resources on my blog, which is linked in my profile information. I am going to put together a separate resource for that. And before I forget, I want to give you the resources document, which is basically a bunch of businesses and where to find supplies. Things like Dick Blick and Michaels and Amazon, John Neal Books, who does an actual SCA discount, which is really nice. He does a 5% discount. I get a lot of my stuff through there. Again, all of these documents are going to be living documents, so I'll be able to update them as I add things, and we'll go from there. Are there, before I kind of wind down, are there any specific questions anybody has that I can answer now before I give my sort of end spiel?
Audrey, would you comment on what colors of gouache you would recommend being like a basic first set of colors for a new illuminator?
Yeah, absolutely. So the basic set that I would recommend are permanent white, ivory black, ultramarine. Light is the preference. I use deep because I like deep. And then geranium is one of the common reds. I prefer carmine. Either is fine. And then either a Naples yellow, which is sort of muted, or a cadmium yellow. I like the cadmium yellow because I can do heraldic yellow with it very well. And then if you're going to branch out, I would certainly pick up a purple because mixing purple is next to impossible. And if you're using Holbein, the purple that I use is iris. And then if you want a green, I would say olive or leaf green. Olive would be the preference, leaf would be a secondary. And if you want to have lots of fun, alizarin crimson.
Since you're talking to beginning scribes about getting started with stuff, you should touch on transporting scrolls. Once they've done something, people should think about how they're going to get it from their house to court or wherever else it's going to be used.
Yeah, so actually that's going to be a later class, but definitely the intention is that this class will be here I'm going to put a kit in your hand. The next class is here we're going to move paint for a while, and not actually panic people with the creation of a scroll. But in general, yes, moving a scroll is something that's near and dear to my heart, seeing as I probably have 80 sitting in my house right now, all said and done. Their Majesties are filtering all of their scrolls through me and then getting them signed, and then we're pushing them back out while we're in pandemic times. Scrolls generally should be transported ideally in some version of a scroll keeper that has plastic to protect them from the wet, and some sort of hard board inside to keep them stiff so that they don't get bent. May, have you had your hand up? Nope.
I remember to unmute first.
Oh, there we go. You're good.
Okay. Do you have any suggestions about what to corral all of this in? You know, a box, little stacky things, like, or just, you know, whatever makes your organizational heart happy.
Totally whatever makes your organizational heart happy. I actually have a giant rolling kit that I can put everything in and then take to classes. Like it's a 3-tiered toolbox. But a fishing tackle box works great and is really easy to use. I will see if I can locate a couple of really good ones that will let you put everything that you need in it. The top of my box, my whole thing is on giant wheels, and Camille and Christiana laughed at me the first time I rolled it into a Scribal, and then Christiana said, "Oh, I understand why you have this now, because it has everything." Like everything, all sizes of paper, plus reference material, plus all of the paint that I need, plus the jars, plus the pipettes, you name it, it's in there. And I can support multiple scribes with it. But I can detach just the top piece, and it will actually carry a 9x12 piece of pad of Bristol in it underneath the tray that has the paint and my brushes and calligraphy stuff in. But a fishing tackle box works really well, especially if you want to be mobile. If you don't want to be mobile, then you can use anything. My office is really scary right now. All right, are there any other questions? All right, so my goal at this point is to, oh, Maeve, did you have another question? Yep.
Hello?
Yep.
Okay. Do the brushes on the recommended list, are they, what kind of bristles are they? Are they natural, or does it matter?
These ones are synthetic. Let me double check, but these ones are synthetic. If you're gonna do natural, Sable is really good. The Kolinsky is really good. Also really expensive. Part of the reason I use these is because they are really affordable, and I don't feel bad when I abuse them. And I then, you know, retire. I can't hold all of my brushes in one hand. These are, I think they're listed in the mixed media section, if that helps. Might be watercolor, but I think they're listed as mixed media. So you can do a little bit of everything with them. So my intent is to, in about a month's time, have another class that is designed to teach people how to mix paint and put paint on paper, and create a small design. And once we've done that, we're going to talk about scroll layout and scroll design, and then work on, I'm hoping over the course of a couple of months, the creation of some scroll blanks as a group. And I'll be posting a supplies list for that first class really early on. I'm thinking probably in the next week. And I'll talk with Mariette about that. I bought a fancy new camera so that I can do heads down display. And I'm going to test that actually with Robert so that we can see if it's going to work. I suspect it is. It's the same one that Ian is using to teach calligraphy with. So on that note, that's all I have.
Okay.
This was excellent. Thank you so much.
If there are any other questions for the session, ask them now. Otherwise, I will stop recording and y'all can chat. No questions? All right, I'm going to stop recording.